Something happened this morning that every national security expert in Washington is talking about, and almost nobody in mainstream media is covering it correctly. Yes, Donald Trump just declared that Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei is dead. Yes, that is an earth-shattering development on its own. But I need you to stop and focus on something else entirely, because buried inside that Truth Social post is a single sentence that former CIA directors and four-star generals are calling one of the most reckless intelligence disclosures in modern American history. Not from a whistleblower, not from a leak, from the President of the United States himself, on social media, for every foreign intelligence agency in the world to read. I have spent the last several hours going through that post word by word, cross-referencing it against classified protocol standards and legal precedent, and what I found should alarm every single American regardless of your political affiliation. This video is going to show you exactly what Trump revealed, why it matters, and what happens next, because the consequences of that one sentence extend far beyond Iran. If you are not subscribed yet, do it right now, because this story is moving fast, and you cannot afford to be behind. Let me take you back to this morning. At approximately 6 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time, while most of Washington was still asleep, Donald Trump logged on to Truth Social and published a post that is now being read in intelligence capitals from Moscow to Beijing to Tehran. And I want to read you one specific sentence from that post. Not the part about Khamenei being dead, not the part about Iran being obliterated. This sentence right here, quote, "He was unable to avoid our intelligence and highly sophisticated tracking systems." I need you to understand what just happened there, because on the surface, it reads like a boast, like a president chest-thumping after a military victory. But inside that sentence is something that every signals intelligence professional, every CIA case officer, every counterintelligence analyst is trained from day one never to do. Trump just confirmed, publicly, in writing, permanently, that the United States possesses active operational tracking systems sophisticated enough to locate and eliminate a target as protected as the Supreme Leader of Iran. Pause on that. This is not classified information that leaked through a whistleblower after years of investigation. This is not an intelligence assessment obtained through Freedom of Information requests. This is the President of the United States voluntarily, casually, and publicly confirming the existence and effectiveness of covert intelligence capabilities in a social media post before the sun rose over Washington. In the intelligence community, there is a foundational principle called neither confirm nor deny. It exists for one reason. The moment you confirm a capability, you tell your adversaries exactly what to hide from, exactly what to shield against, exactly what systems to start hunting. This morning, that principle was shattered, not by an enemy, not by a traitor, by the commander-in-chief himself. And that is where this story actually begins. Now let us get into exactly what was disclosed, because this was not one mistake. This was 3 separate intelligence violations packed into a single 400-word post. And I want to walk you through each one, because when you see them laid out together, the picture becomes genuinely alarming. Violation number 1. Trump confirmed the existence and operational success of active tracking systems. When he wrote that Khamenei was unable to avoid our intelligence and highly sophisticated tracking systems, he did not just boast about a victory, he confirmed a capability. And in the world of intelligence, confirming a capability is functionally equivalent to handing your adversary a roadmap of what to defend against. Think about what that means in practice. Every hostile intelligence service in the world, Russia's FSB, China's Ministry of State Security, Hezbollah's Unit 910, the remnants of Iran's MOIS, they are now running analysis on that sentence right now. They are asking, what tracking systems? Signals intelligence? Satellite surveillance? Human assets with access to the Supreme Leader's schedule? Each answer narrows the field. Each answer tells them something they did not know before 6 o'clock this morning. Edward Snowden was charged under the Espionage Act for disclosing less specific information about surveillance capabilities. I am not making a legal argument here. I am making a factual one. The standard that applies to every other person with a security clearance in this country does not appear to apply to the man sitting in the Oval Office. Violation number 2. Trump publicly confirmed active operational coordination with Israel in real time. The exact words were, "working closely with Israel." Those 4 words published while the operation was still unfolding, while Israeli assets were still potentially in the field, while communication channels between the 2 governments were still active. Those 4 words create a targeting problem that no military planner would ever willingly create. Here is why this matters. Iran's intelligence services and their proxy networks do not need to know the details of the coordination. They just need confirmation that it exists and that it is live. That confirmation allows them to begin working backward, identifying communication patterns, tracing personnel movements, hunting the seam between American and Israeli operations where vulnerabilities are most likely to exist. Trump handed them the starting point of that investigation himself. Violation number 3. Trump publicly declared the strategic objective of the operation against IRGC forces. When he wrote that IRGC military and security forces are looking for immunity from us and that later they only get death, he did not just threaten. He disclosed the end game. He told the IRGC exactly what Washington expects from them, which means he told every IRGC commander who is not planning to defect exactly how much time they have and exactly what posture to adopt before the next phase of the operation begins. Military planners call this operational security, or OPSEC. The fundamental rule of OPSEC is simple. You do not tell the enemy what you want them to do, because then they can choose not to do it. Or worse, they can use that information to prepare a response you did not anticipate. Now I want to address something directly, because I know some of you are thinking it. There are people who will argue that Trump was sending a psychological message, that this was deliberate pressure designed to demoralize Iranian forces and encourage defections. That is a legitimate strategic argument. Psychological operations are real, they are used, and they sometimes work. But here is the problem with that argument. Psychological operations are planned, coordinated, and executed through specific channels with specific safeguards. They are not improvised on a social media platform at 6 in the morning before the National Security Council has convened. The difference between a strategic psyop and an impulsive post is not just procedural. It is the difference between a controlled detonation and a gas leak. If this was intentional, where was the interagency coordination? If this was spontaneous, who stopped it? And either way, who is accountable? Hit that like button right now, because the next layer of this story goes somewhere that almost nobody is talking about. And I need the algorithm to push this analysis to the people who need to hear it. Now I want to shift focus, because the intelligence breach is alarming. But what Trump wrote next raises a question that goes to the very foundation of how this country is supposed to work. Here is the exact sentence. Quote, "The heavy and pinpoint bombing, however, will continue uninterrupted throughout the week for as long as necessary to achieve our objective of peace throughout the Middle East and indeed the world." Read that again slowly. The President of the United States just announced on Truth Social, before Congress was formally notified, before any authorization vote, before any public deliberation, that a sustained bombing campaign against a sovereign nation will continue indefinitely, not for hours, not as an emergency response, for weeks, for as long as necessary. His words. So let me ask you a very simple question. Who authorized that? Because there is a law passed by Congress in 1973 called the War Powers Resolution. And that law exists for one reason. It exists because the framers of this Constitution were terrified of exactly this scenario. A single executive acting alone, committing the nation to open-ended military conflict without the consent of the people's representatives. Here's what the law actually says. Within 48 hours of introducing American forces into hostilities, the president must notify Congress in writing. After 60 days, if Congress has not formally authorized the military action, the president must begin withdrawing forces. The law is explicit. The law is binding, and the law has been tested repeatedly in Kosovo, in Libya, in Syria, with varying degrees of compliance and resistance from different administrations. But here is what makes this moment different from every previous test of the War Powers Resolution. In every prior case, every single one, the administration at least performed the notification. They sent the letter to Congress. They went through the procedural motion, even when critics argued it was insufficient. The notification happened before the public declaration of extended military operations. This morning, Trump announced a week-long bombing campaign on social media before the formal congressional notification process was completed, before the Senate Armed Services Committee was briefed, before the Gang of Eight, the select group of congressional leaders entitled to receive classified intelligence briefings on exactly this kind of operation, had been fully informed. Think about the institutional implications of that sequence. The American people learned about the duration and scope of this military campaign from Truth Social before their elected representatives were formally told. Now, I want to be fair here because intellectual honesty matters. There is a counter-argument that deserves to be addressed. Supporters of this action will correctly point out that the War Powers Resolution has never been definitively tested in the Supreme Court. They will argue that presidents from both parties have stretched the boundaries of executive war-making authority for decades. They will say that the speed of modern warfare makes pre-authorization impractical. Those are real arguments. They are not invented. And there is legitimate constitutional scholarship supporting a broader view of presidential war powers. But here is where that argument breaks down in this specific case. The question is not whether the president has authority to order a military strike. The question is whether the president has authority to unilaterally commit the nation to an open-ended military campaign, days, weeks, as long as necessary, and announce that commitment publicly before Congress exercises any oversight role whatsoever. That is a different question. And the answer under any honest reading of the War Powers Resolution and the constitutional framework it was designed to protect is no. Let me give you the historical parallel that should be keeping congressional Republicans awake tonight. In 2020, after the killing of Qasem Soleimani, Congress passed a War Powers Resolution limiting Trump's military options against Iran. Trump vetoed it. The Senate failed to override that veto by 4 votes. 4 votes was the margin between congressional oversight and executive unilateral authority over war with Iran. That was a targeted strike against one individual. What is happening right now is categorically larger, and the same constitutional question is now being asked again, except this time the bombing is already underway, the campaign has already been declared open-ended, and the announcement came not from the Pentagon or the State Department or a formal address to the nation. It came from a social media post. Pause. Let that settle. A president just declared war, and he did it on Truth Social. Now let us talk about what comes next, because this is where I need you to set aside everything you think you know about how Iran works, because most of what you have been told is incomplete. Trump's post this morning suggested that IRGC forces are already looking for immunity, that Iranian security services are ready to stand down, that this is, in his framing, the single greatest chance for the Iranian people to take back their country. I want to engage with that argument seriously, because dismissing it entirely would be intellectually dishonest. Decapitation strategy, the deliberate targeting of a regime's top leadership, has worked before. In 1989, the removal of Manuel Noriega effectively ended Panamanian resistance within days. The death of Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in 2019 accelerated the collapse of the caliphate's command structure significantly. So the theory is not baseless. Removing a supreme leader can, under the right conditions, produce rapid institutional collapse. But here is why Iran is fundamentally different from every historical parallel Trump's advisors may be drawing on. And I need you to understand this, because this distinction is the difference between a strategy and a catastrophe. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is not a conventional military force. It is not structured like the Iraqi army that collapsed in 2003. It is not organized around a single command hierarchy that fails when the top is removed. The IRGC was deliberately designed, over 47 years, to be ideologically self-sustaining. Every unit commander is simultaneously a military officer and a political officer. The ideology is the chain of command. You cannot bomb the ideology. Let me give you specific numbers, so this is not abstract. The IRGC has approximately 190,000 active personnel within Iran itself. Beyond Iranian borders, the Quds Force, the IRGC's external operations arm, maintains active networks across at least 7 countries. Hezbollah in Lebanon, which the IRGC built and still funds, has an estimated 100,000 fighters and an arsenal of over 150,000 rockets. The Houthi movement in Yemen, which the IRGC supplies and directs, has spent the last 2 years demonstrating its ability to disrupt global shipping through the Red Sea. Hashd al-Shaabi in Iraq, another IRGC proxy, controls territory and checkpoints across large portions of that country. These networks do not disappear when Tehran is bombed. They activate. Now I want to take you back to 2020 because the historical parallel here is precise and it is important. When the Trump administration killed Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds Force, arguably the most powerful military figure in Iran after Khamenei himself, the immediate American assessment was similar to what we are hearing today. Shock and disorientation within Iranian ranks. Potential for political opening. What actually happened? 11 days later, Iran fired 16 ballistic missiles at Al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq. 110 American service members were diagnosed with traumatic brain injuries. Iran publicly called it a measured response. A slap, in their own words. And senior American officials, including John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, required permanent security details for years afterward because of credible assassination plots traced directly to Iranian retaliation planning. That was the response to killing one general. We are now discussing the killing of the supreme leader himself, the figure who, in Iranian political theology, is the direct representative of God on earth. The emotional, ideological, and strategic imperative to respond is not comparable to Soleimani. It is categorically beyond it. And here's the part that nobody is saying loudly enough. The response will not necessarily be a missile strike that we can see coming and prepare for. Iran's most dangerous retaliatory capabilities are asymmetric. Cyber attacks against American infrastructure, activation of sleeper networks inside the United States and Europe, targeted assassinations of American officials abroad. Financial system disruptions routed through proxy actors in ways that are difficult to attribute and therefore difficult to deter. Former CIA Director John Brennan said it directly this morning. And I want to make sure you heard what he actually said beneath the diplomatic language. He said there is no scenario in which some elements of the Iranian system do not seek retaliation. Not some scenarios. No scenario. The question is not whether retaliation is coming. The question is what form it takes, where it lands, and whether the American government, which learned about the scope of its own military campaign from a social media post, is prepared to handle what comes next. Now, I want to show you something that virtually every major outlet covering this story has completely missed. And this is the part where being willing to slow down and actually read the details, rather than just react to the headlines, makes all the difference. Go back to the timing of this strike. Israel attacked in the early morning hours, before sunrise. And if you know anything about Israeli military doctrine, and I mean anything at all, you know that this is anomalous. Israel's Air Force has conducted hundreds of strikes over the past several decades. The overwhelming pattern, documented consistently by military analysts and confirmed by former Israeli defense officials in multiple interviews, is nighttime operations. Darkness provides cover. Darkness reduces visual acquisition by ground-based air defense systems. Darkness is doctrine. This strike happened in the morning. That deviation is not a footnote. That deviation is the entire story, because there is only one operationally logical reason to abandon a decades-long tactical preference and strike in daylight hours. The target was not in a fixed location. The target was in motion. The target was at a meeting. Think about what that means. Someone knew about that meeting. Someone knew the location, the time, the specific window during which Khamenei and other senior leaders would be gathered in one place. That is not signals intelligence. Signals intelligence tells you where a phone is. It does not tell you that the supreme leader of Iran will be at a specific location at a specific time on a specific morning. That level of precision requires human intelligence, a source, someone inside the Iranian system with access to the supreme leader's schedule, one of the most protected pieces of information in one of the most security-conscious governments on earth. Now hold that thought and go back to Trump's post. When Trump wrote that Khamenei was unable to avoid our intelligence and highly sophisticated tracking systems, he did not just confirm that tracking systems exist. He confirmed that those systems successfully located a target that Iran believed was protected by layers of counterintelligence specifically designed to prevent exactly this outcome. Here is what that confirmation does. It does not reveal the source's name. It does not identify the specific method, but it does something almost as damaging. It tells Iranian counterintelligence exactly where to look. It tells them that the breach was precise enough to track the supreme leader's real-time movements. It tells them that the penetration of their security apparatus was deep enough to access schedule-level information about the most protected individual in the country. Iranian counterintelligence is now running a damage assessment. They are cross-referencing everyone who had access to Khamenei's schedule on that specific morning. They are narrowing the list. And somewhere on that list is a person, a human being, whose life expectancy changed dramatically the moment Trump hit publish on that post. This is the part that keeps former intelligence officers awake at night. Not the geopolitical consequences, not the congressional oversight failures. The human cost of a 400-word social media post written before Washington finished its morning coffee. Someone is going to pay for that post, and it will not be Donald Trump. So let us bring this together, because everything we have covered today connects to one central question that Washington is not asking loudly enough. We have a president who confirmed classified intelligence capabilities in a social media post. We have an open-ended bombing campaign announced on Truth Social before Congress was formally notified. We have proxy networks across 7 countries that do not disappear when their patron is killed. They activate. And we have a human intelligence source whose cover may have been functionally compromised by 400 words written before sunrise. 4 separate institutional failures. 1 post, 1 morning. Here's the question I want to leave you with. When the most dangerous intelligence leak of this crisis came not from a foreign adversary, not from a whistleblower, not from a hostile journalist, but from the commander-in-chief himself, what mechanism exists to prevent the next one? I do not have a clean answer to that, and anyone who tells you they do is not being straight with you. If this analysis showed you something that the cable networks did not, subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because Iran will respond, Congress will convene, and when the next development breaks, and it will break fast, I will be here before anyone else. Do not wait until you are already behind.